Hey folks, how you doing? Dave McRae here. So in this video, I want to give you my overall general thoughts on the movie Elvis. Now, let me preface this video by saying this. Maybe you're tuning in for the very first time, or maybe you're not, and maybe you just forget this. I'm not a movie reviewer. Okay, so this isn't going to be a, structured sort of formal movie review where I talk about plot points, story beats, character analysis, really deep dive shit is what I'm talking about. Of course, I'm going to talk about some of those things, but I mean really deep dive kind of. I'm not a movie reviewer. I know I get lumped in with them and I understand why totally, but if you look at my catalog of videos, I don't really do movie reviews. I don't at all. I save my one sort of real movie review for a Halloween movie, right? So if you're looking for a deep dive, really structured kind of, official movie review kind of thing, you may want to go somewhere else. But I am going to shoot from the hip. I'm going to talk off the cuff and give you my thoughts on the movie Elvis. And I would like to think I bring maybe a bit of a different perspective because of my relationship with Elvis Presley. Now, I'm not going to deep dive here. I'm going to put a link to a video that I posted a couple of months ago talking about the Elvis trailer, where I do talk about my experience with Elvis and why Elvis is very special to me. And of course, it involves my father and the Jerry Springer Show and a restaurant. And my father was a journalist and a columnist who was going to meet Elvis in the fall of 1977. But of course, Elvis died on August the 16th. So that didn't happen. You can click the link below in the pinned post. And if you don't know what I'm talking about and you want to learn more about that, but it would take way too long for me to dive into here. I want to jump right into the movie. But let's just say I not only grew up on a healthy dose of his music, like a lot of us did, but also a healthy dose of knowledge about the man because of what my father did for a living. And of course, my father grew up through that time as well. So, so I was eager to see this movie. It's unfortunate I couldn't see it with my dad. My dad passed away in 2011 because it would have been really cool to go see this movie with him. And as I was watching the movie last night, I was thinking to myself, I wonder what my father would think of that or that kind of stuff, right? Okay, so let me give you my overall thoughts. So here we go. All right, number one, it's a Baz Luhrmann movie, and it feels and looks like a Baz Luhrmann movie. Some of the reviews I was reading before I went and saw the movie that were complaining about, the glitz and the glam and the, very ADD and lots of shots and stuff like that, didn't bother me. It's definitely there. It's definitely Baz Luhrmann. But because Elvis Presley, in and of himself, was such an iconic, larger-than-life character, it makes sense that if you're going to have a biopic that's very and you're looking over here and looking over here, that you would do it with Elvis Presley. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily do that with, the three tenors, or some opera singer, right? Because it wouldn't make any sense. But with Elvis, I mean, just the name Elvis, is almost a synonym for, do you know what I'm saying? So that didn't bother me. That didn't bother me at all. But it's very Baz Luhrmann. There are a few creative choices he made in terms of music and things like that, which he always does in every one of his movies, that, again, I wouldn't have done. It's not something I would do, but it didn't bother me as much in the movie as it did in the trailer. I'll just say that. So overall, in terms of the how it was presented, the stylistic choices that Luhrmann presented this biopic in didn't bother me. I thought it worked very well because of who Elvis is. Okay, so let's now talk about Austin Butler. Let's jump right into this guy. So I've often said on this channel that the job of an actor is not to, when they are taking over the role of, some iconic character from some other actor, or they are, stepping into the shoes of some biopic, to become, some larger than life pop culture figure like Elvis Presley. It's not the job of an actor to do an impression of whatever shoes they're trying to fill, right? On this channel, we often talk about Robert Englund and Freddy Krueger because we're a horror channel. Whoever plays Freddy Krueger next, it's not the job of them to do a Robert Englund impression because you're going to fail. The job of that actor is to bring the essence of Freddy Krueger there, so that when you watch the movie, you go, well, it's not Robert Englund's Freddy Krueger, but I totally believe that's Freddy Krueger, 100%, no issues whatsoever. And that's what you need to do. And that is what Austin Butler has done here with Elvis Presley. It would have been very easy, for Austin Butler or anybody to do a caricaturized cartoon version of Elvis. There's a certain generation of people out there, and rightly so, I get it, who when they think of Elvis or they see the name Elvis, they think of fat Elvis, white jumpsuit, sweat rolling down the face, Las Vegas going, I mean, that's how he's mocked in sort of pop culture in a lot of ways, right? You see Elvis impersonators, they're always in white jumpsuits with the big, gold chains and the gold sunglasses. And that was a part of Elvis's life. There's no doubt about it. But there's more to it than just that. When you're doing a biopic, the job of the filmmakers is not to hire somebody to cosplay as Elvis or to do, some Elvis impersonator. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for somebody to embody the character. And that requires an understanding of those nuances and idiosyncrasies that make Elvis, that go beyond. Anybody could do that. Throw me in a fat suit and a white jumpsuit with sweat rolling down my face and dye my hair black and throw me on stage with a guitar, and there I am. And you know who I'm being. You know who I'm trying to be, even though I don't really look like him, right? And that's another thing. Austin Butler, when I watched the trailer for Elvis a couple of months ago, no, he doesn't look exactly like Elvis. Of course not. There's a couple of shots in the trailer and in the movie where he looks more like John Travolta from Grease than he does Elvis. It's just a couple of shots. But he looks enough like Elvis, that if he were to capture the cadence, the essence, the idiosyncrasies, the nuances of the man himself, he could win you over. And he did. He was phenomenal. Even those who didn't like the movie, the general consensus is, even from those who didn't like the movie, Austin Butler was fucking amazing. And he is likely to be in contention for a Best Actor Academy Award nomination at the very least. Who knows if he's going to win, right? Because we don't know what the competition is going to be yet. But at the very least, I'd be surprised if he wasn't on the ticket, unless there's, another 5 performances we've yet to see this year that just nudge him out. But he was amazing. The way he was on stage and his presence, and listen, I've seen all those old clips and videos of him, singing to the Hound Dog and on stage where he's singing Hound Dog and he's gyrating his hips and he's going to the audience. He did it. And he looks enough like him that if he can master all those things and the way he is when he goes off stage and the way he speaks and everything, I totally bought it. He was brilliant. It is true that it is a star-making performance, for sure, 100%. And also, Austin Butler sang as well. Now, there's some mixture in there, okay? There's some songs where some Elvis, some Butler, but the very first song that we see him sing when he's in the pink suit at the very beginning, where he's like, well, you can go to college. That's Austin Butler. And Elvis early on in his life, like again, when we think of Elvis, right, we think, I hear as the snow fly, which is a great song, by the way, in the ghetto. But, we think of that, that came later. Very early on in the 50s, especially with Jailhouse Rock and That's All Right Mama, he was less, and he was higher in his register. And that's what he sounded like. And Austin Butler nailed it. Sounded great. He sounded great. And Austin Butler, when I watch him interviewed, he naturally has kind of like a voice like this. And I'm like, is he from the South? No, I think he was born in California. But he's got like kind of this sound to his voice when he talks, And I'm like, and so he had a bit of a head start where he was able to turn that kind of into Elvis because he's already kind of deeper in the register. He sounded great. And again, those little things where he's up on his toes and he's coming down, I totally bought into it. I bought into it 100%. I thought he was phenomenal. And I thought he captured Elvis tremendously in the different eras as well, through the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. And spoiler alert, we all know Elvis dies, but there's one of his final concerts, maybe it was his final one, where Elvis is singing the Unchained Melody on the piano in Vegas, and he's fat and he's sweating and he was in really poor health. It's June 77, I think. And they had Austin Butler in makeup. I'm assuming it's makeup. And because you never know these days, maybe it was like deep fake shit, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it was prosthetics. And he's there, and you can tell it's Austin Butler, but then there's this nice transition where they go from Austin to the real Elvis from 1977. And I was like, oh, that was so like, and if you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it. Like, that's how good they made him look. That's how good they made him look. And I was like, oh, this, and I turned to my girlfriend. I'm like, oh, that's the real Elvis now, right? But if you weren't paying attention, you might think it's still Austin Butler. Like, it was really well done, really well done. So in terms of Austin Butler and the character of Elvis, he nailed it, 100%. 100%. But it all comes down to the essence. Because no, he doesn't look exactly like him, but he nailed everything else so well that it allowed me to believe that was Elvis Presley. I had no issues, no issues. All right, so let's talk about the other character that has sort of caused a bit of controversy here, which is, of course, Tom Hanks's Colonel Tom Parker. Yes, it is true that Colonel Tom Parker was neither a Colonel, a Tom, or a Parker. That is true. And it's also true that Parker didn't sound like that. I think where was he born? Holland or something? He didn't really have an accent, at least not that accent. And Tom Hanks did put on an accent. A lot of people have said that the Tom Hanks character, his portrayal of Parker, took them out of the movie. It didn't for me. I thought it was fine. Maybe it's because it's a very flashy, over the top, on cocaine kind of movie anyway, that a more cartoony type villain works. He didn't do that in the movie. He didn't do that. But yes, was the portrayal of Parker somewhat like cartoon villainy, I guess so. I guess so. I mean, yes, maybe that portrayal wouldn't work in a more serious, straight-laced biopic drama, maybe. I could see that standing out as a bit cartoony in that. But because this movie is so flashy and so Baz Luhrmann and so... it worked. It fit right in with everything else. So it didn't bother me. I thought Hanks was brilliant. I thought he was fantastic. The fat suit looked great. He looked like Colonel Tom Parker for sure. At least I thought he did. And I thought he was tremendous. So everybody saying that Hanks took them out of the movie, or those saying that, I should say, not everybody, but those who said that, I had no issues with that whatsoever. Yes, it is. Okay, so that aside, like a lot of biopics, they do take creative liberties in terms of things they, skim over, some of the more controversial aspects of Elvis Presley's personal life, like his relationship with Priscilla Presley. They didn't really dive into that, but as a lot of people wanted them to address that maybe on a more serious level, I think they could have. Yeah, I do. I think they could have tackled that. But I understand why they didn't, because of the style and the type of biopic it was and the pace that it was. To address that effectively and to address it appropriately, I think would have, with all due respect, I think would have taken too much time. Now, for some people out there, well, fuck, you got to do it anyway. Take the time that you need. This is really important. I agree. I understand. But then that's maybe a different biopic. Right? That's a different energy. That's a different pace. That's a different type of movie. For this movie, again, I mean, it's Baz Luhrmann, and this is it would have slowed the movie down to get the right addressing of that issue. It would have slowed the movie down quite a bit. Now, there are people out there that could say, well, they could have done this, this, and this, but I don't know if it would have been enough for people. Yes, they could have mentioned, they could have had an angle where they addressed it, but then it probably would have moved on after like 30 seconds or like a minute or like 2 minutes. And I don't know if it would have been enough or satisfying to those who, take real issue with this, understandably so, and want to kind of, see more of that, more meat on that. So I understand that, but it didn't bother me because I get it. I get it. There are some people out there that said, well, they gave you like the Wikipedia version, or this is more of a, yeah, I mean, it's Baz Luhrmann here, right? It's this kind of a biopic. Not that there weren't truths in there. There's a lot of, truths in there, but that part of it, yes, they did kind of go and skim over it, as a lot of biopics do. I mean, Bohemian Rhapsody, there's a lot of shit in there. It's a great movie as it was. There's a lot of shit in there that they skimmed over as well. So Elvis wouldn't be the first to do that. The other thing that I want to address before I wrap this up here, because I thought the movie was really good. So one of the statements that has always bothered me is the statement, Elvis stole black music. Now, I understand I'm a white guy talking about this, okay? So for some out there that might cancel my opinion altogether. But I would like to think that I'm coming at this from, at the very least, an educated point of view. So there's two camps. There are those who feel that he stole black music. Fuck Elvis. Cultural appropriation bullshit. Fuck you, Elvis. There were people before Elvis. Why didn't they get the fucking... That camp, right? Completely understand. Completely understand. And then there's the camp that feel that, no, he was just heavily influenced by it. And that's the camp I side in. And I'll explain why. Elvis Presley was born on January the 8th, 1935 in Tupelo, Mississippi. He hailed from Memphis, Tennessee. He was a Southern boy. That's why he sounded like this. You know what I'm saying? That's why he had that accent, is basically what I'm trying to say. He grew up in that culture. He grew up very poor. He was always around that culture, the black culture, black people, black churches, gospel music, rhythm and blues. That's what he grew up on. I thought Elvis, the Baz Luhrmann movie, did a good job of acknowledging that. Now, is it enough for those who don't like Elvis and feel he stole the music? Fuck you. No, probably not. Because what they're looking for is more of a deeper dive, more of an acknowledgement. And I understand that. The Baz Luhrmann movie is not that. That's a different biopic, very much like the Priscilla shit. That's a different biopic. That's a different energy. That's a different type of movie, more of a drama, maybe even a series where you got that breathing room that you can really sort of flesh things out. But I thought in the confines of a Baz Luhrmann movie that they did a good job of acknowledging those influences and those roots and where it comes from. Elvis Presley, in my estimation, never made a conscious choice. Like he woke up one day and thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to steal this music and pretend it's mine. I see no evidence of that. I see no evidence that Elvis made a conscious choice to steal black music. Now, why was he called the king of rock and roll? Well, first, Elvis didn't call himself the king of rock and roll. That was a label that was put on him for, marketing and all that kind of stuff. And it made sense as why, you would. So let's talk about this. When you hear the term the king of rock and roll, yes, I can understand why that upsets a lot of people, because it's like, well, he wasn't the originator of the music, which he wasn't, which he never said he was, by the way. He never claimed to be. But I can understand, well, why would you call him the king? You got Chuck Berry, you got Fats Domino, you got Little Richard. You got why the fuck are you? He didn't come up with that fucking sound and those moves. Fuck you. He's not the king. Okay, well, let's think about this. 1950s America. Segregation was huge. It was huge. It's not that there were not talented black artists, but they could never have achieved, at that time, they could never have achieved the heights and stardom that Elvis Presley did. Not because they weren't as talented, yes, because they were black. And yes, Elvis helped that he was attractive and white. It was huge. Huge part of it. Yep. It's not a very nice thing to think about, is it? But it's true. He was called the king of rock and roll. That label was put on him because he brought that style of music to the masses, to the mainstream. Something black artists couldn't do. Not because they weren't talented, because they were black. Sucks. It's shitty. It's bullshit. You're fucking right. It's bullshit. 100%. But that was the truth. And he brought that music to the masses, to, I hate to say it like this, white America. And naturally, white America had never fucking heard this music before. I mean, not everybody, obviously, but there was a lot of white America, maybe especially if you were a teenager. What the fuck? This is great shit. Damn right it's great shit. But it was a different time. And the pop culture impact that Elvis had, and did it help that he was sexy and good looking? Yes, obviously. And he brought that to the mainstream, and the impact had never been seen before. My dad was born in 1942. So when Elvis hit the scene, my dad was he was a teenager. He was a teenager. 100%. My dad was like 16, 17. My dad remembered it very well. And he said, son, nobody had seen anything like it. Nobody had seen anything like it. When John Lennon, I think it's John Lennon, who says before Elvis, there was no one. He doesn't mean there was literally no one, that Elvis was the originator and that he came up with it. That's not what John Lennon meant. He meant at this level in the mainstream, the pop culture, the stardom, the impact, holy fuck. Like now we're desensitized to it because we see this kind of big stars in music all the time. But nobody had seen anything like this before. Not at this level. Not like this. And that's what John Lennon meant. Before Elvis, there was no one. in this context. Okay. Not that there was no one. Yes, there was plenty before Elvis. They just were black. And that fucking sucks that they couldn't achieve that. So Elvis did have his detractors, for sure. Not every black artist liked him. But he had his supporters as well, like Chuck Berry, B.B. King, even Little Richard came around after a while, who even said that, like, that ironically, Elvis opened a lot of doors for us because of that, and I'm not saying that, that it was all perfect. I'm not, there were times when Elvis remained silent, when maybe he should have spoke up and all that kind of stuff, for sure. I'm just, again, you see how the discussion is more nuanced? And you're free to disagree with me and add your own sort of, thoughts, 100%. But it's a nuanced discussion. It's not black and white, right? Do you know what I'm saying? You can't just say, Elvis stole black music. It's like, well, no, not really. There's a lot more going on here than him waking up going, I'm just going to take it and run. I mean, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. So I thought Baz Luhrmann's movie did a good job within the confines of a Luhrmann film of at least acknowledging that, because it is important. It's very important. It's very important. 100%. Anyways, folks, my name's Dave McRae. I could keep going, but I think I'll leave it there because I think I've given you a good sort of idea of what I thought of the film and sort of the major points I wanted to tackle. Comment below and let me know your thoughts on what you thought of Elvis. I would be very curious to know. I really enjoyed the film. But make no mistake, Austin Butler as Elvis, yeah, he was the movie. It's like, holy shit. Do you know what I mean? He was great. He was fantastic. Comment below and let me know your thoughts. If you want to follow me on social media, you can. There are my links right there. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. All my links are in the description. Check them out until your heart's content. And when your heart is content, check them out again. Alrighty, that'll do it for me. In the meantime and in between time, I will talk to you soon. Cheers.